If you're enjoying the Health Geeks Book Club podcast, we'd appreciate if you hit the subscribe button, leave a like, rating, or review, whichever your preferred podcatcher platform allows.
This edition of our podcast is brought to you by 360 Health and Well Balanced Nutrition.
Welcome to the Health Geeks Book Club podcast. Listen in as Kristen Norton and Eleanor Russell review all those great health and wellness books you've been wanting to read or you have read and want to talk about. Here's Kristen and Eleanor.
Y'all, are there any other dog owners out there that have a problem with keeping your books away from your dog?
You sound like a kid in school.
The dog ate my my book again. So I'm sitting here looking at the book we're talking about, Earthing, the most important health discovery ever. And it has a giant chunk taken out of the left corner and the right corner. And the sad thing is I got this as a Christmas present, a brand new book. And I left it in the living room one day when I was gone and came back, and she apparently thought it was a good snack.
It's a delicious book.
She goes, "This is a good read, Ma."
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure it's well-balanced meal for her. So, yeah, we are talking about Earthing, the most important health discovery ever, by authors Clinton Ober, Stephen T. Sinatra, MD, and Martin Zucker. And Eleanor, you were the one that brought this book to our attention, correct?
Yes, I did. I've had an experience with this. This was copyrighted in 2010, and it was published by Basic Health Publications out of Laguna Beach, California. And these authors are an interesting collection of people writing a wellness book. We have a cable TV salesman.
Who knew? Oh, yeah,
he's really
cable guy.
The cable guy,
that's what
yeah.
I thought of.
But he is a self-educated scientist, and he is a skilled electrician, I would say. Then Stephen Sinatra is an MD with a lot of credentials, board-certified cardiologist, certified psychotherapist for more than 30 years. And then there's this guy named Martin Zucker, who is, I guess, a journalist, writer, a ghostwriter, that kind of a thing. So it's an interesting combination of guys writing this book.
It is. It is. And so everybody who liked the episode we did about forest bathing, this was kind of reminiscent of that to me, and just looking at the way spending time outdoors can affect our health in a different light. So do you have anything else to talk about in the intro before I kind of dive into something?
It's the book is broken into parts, and part one is why we are unhealthy, the missing link. Personal discoveries is part two. Part three is connecting with science, and part four is the Earthing Chronicles. And so it's organized. It's a very readable book, and it has a nice index. You can look things up if you want to go back and find something. So, it's acknowledgments and references for the chapters. So it's well done, I think, to share their ideas.
Yeah.
They've given us something to work with.
Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about the story of Clint Ober and how he came about this. First, would you mind, Eleanor, telling the listeners what earthing is?
Yeah, it's the idea. They also call it grounding, and the idea is to go outside and take your shoes and socks off and stand on the earth. And if you don't want to do that, sit on the earth or lie it flat, put yourself out there and connect back to Mother Earth. There are also products that you can use in the indoor environment called grounding mats. Do you want me to tell you more about that?
No. Well, tell me about why the earth. Why do we need to stand? I think that's what he talks about in the very beginning.
Yeah, well, I think a good place to start is just, if we're going to call this earthing and it's also called grounding, then what exactly is a ground? Because I think that's a foundational thing. And so a ground, as he says, is defined as a conductive object that makes a direct electrical connection to Earth and has the ability to absorb or dissipate an electrical charge, thereby maintaining a grounded object at the stable electrical potential of the Earth. Grounding is central to the safe and stable usage of electricity. A ground connection serves as an electrical sink that minimizes susceptibility of electromagnetic interference in communication systems, reduces the risk of equipment damage due to lightning, eliminates electrostatic buildup, and which can cause damage to system components, and helps protect people who service and repair electrical, electronic, and computer equipment. So in your homes, a lot of us have electricity in our homes. There's a plug on the wall, and if there's 3 holes, that third hole is the ground wire that's supposed to connect it to the earth. Now, his idea, and I think this is supported by other people too, is the earth is a repository for electrons. It has a lot of negative charge on the surface, and the clouds up above us have a combination of electrical and positive charges, and the atmosphere is kind of neutral here in the middle. But we are conductive. We're semiconductors. Does that help us set the bottom there?
Yes, absolutely. So how does a cable TV guy get into this topic of earthing? Well, I thought this was a fun story that I wanted to share that's in the book. So one day Clinton Ober, the TV guy, decides to take his voltmeter, which is something that measures the electric potential differences between Earth and objects. And he just kind of walks around the house and notices that the voltage gets higher when he's closer to lamps and things around his house that have electricity, except for his refrigerator and his computer tower, which were grounded.
And insulated, too.
And insulated. So that just kind of intrigues him. And one night, he rigs up his bed to this pole that's connected to the ground. And his mission is to kind of sync up with the Earth's level of electricity.
Yeah, he went out and got duct tape, metallized duct tape, and made a grid on his bed.
Yes.
It was pretty interesting. And you could do this at home.
This guy's not married, right?
I didn't think he was.
No.
Yeah, and he mentions adult children, but he never mentions a wife in this story. So if she was there at one point, she didn't seem to be there when he was doing this.
Yeah. So for whatever thing he rigged up to try to ground himself in the same way that he did with TV and cable, it helped him sleep. So he did it a couple nights and his sleep got better, and he had always struggled with good sleep. So this was pretty profound for him. And then he started talking about it to other people and did the same kind of rig for a couple other people, and they also started sleeping better. So he's like, I think I'm onto something here. So he ventures out into meet scientists and researchers and people in the medical field, and no one took him seriously.
They kind of laughed at him, didn't they?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And they still are. They still are doing that.
Uh-huh. One of them said if it was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, I still wouldn't believe it.
Right. So he's interested and he wanted to figure it out. So he just did a handful of small studies on his own. They're not quality studies and they are very small, but it produced some interesting results. So there was one that measured cortisol levels in people who were grounded. Now, there wasn't any control group.
And the population was mixed. Yeah, I mean, men and women, and what are their ages and what are their ethnicities, and
right.
So,
but it was neat. So they discovered that when you were grounded by the grounding pad that he made up, it kind of brought your cortisol levels back to the natural fluctuation that we have versus they can, cortisol is a stress hormone that can get spiked and out of whack just from stress in life. And it's supposed to naturally spike a little bit in the morning to turn us into wakefulness. And it's supposed to dip real low at midnight to help us sleep. And he found that when they slept on this grounding pad, it was closer to that natural flow that is best for us with cortisol. So that was kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
So he made these makeshift pads, started getting the word out, and then that became kind of a career almost for him, is to just get better and better at these earthing pads. What did you think of that?
Well, he has a product to sell, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we have to take that into consideration as well.
Absolutely.
And that doesn't mean it's a bad thing, but the studies were very low in number. N equals is what we talk about in population studies. And they were like 10, 6, 11, very, very small. But when you have an idea, you do have to start testing it. And it's not inappropriate to do it on a small sample size.
You got to start somewhere.
You do. And if the small sample size shows you something interesting, then you can move that to the next level of evidence. And so this is what they're fighting against in this whole idea, I think, is when we teach medicine, we don't teach a lot about electricity or energies in the Western allopathic curricula. The Asian or Eastern medicine has...
Like with acupuncture
right.
and
has
chakras.
The meridians of energy and things like that. They have not measured it, but they believe it, and they say healing occurs by attending to these fields. Well, we know there's energy. I mean, we just know that. We use it. We run all sorts of equipment from this energy that we've controlled and harnessed. So they're talking about earth body medicine and then electromedicine, which is a new idea. And it's going to take people stopping and looking at it and not discounting it and maybe doing some larger studies, which I think they need to do. This book has a whole lot of anecdotes. It has testimonials. And when we influence people by testimonials, we really scientifically don't have any evidence that they would get the same result. You know, that's what these larger scientific explorations can do for us, is they say, based on, 10,000 people, the probability that you would get a response is 80% or 50 or whatever. Here, you kind of say, oh, it worked for her, it'll work for me, so I'm going to go buy all these things and do this stuff. That said, I believe in this. I read this book 10 years ago and thought it was curious, and I had my own little personal experience with a fever that I think I've shared in another one of our episodes, where I ended up stripping down and going outside and laying out flat on the earth, and I got better in about 3 hours. And it was like, well, it might have happened if I hadn't done that. We don't know, because I'm one person. We didn't have the control. Mm-hmm. So, we just don't know. But it does feel good. I know when I'm outside with my feet bare on the ground, I just feel better. And when I work in the yard and I'm burning brush, or I'm cutting grass, or I'm cutting down trees, or whatever I'm doing, I get, tired. So I just sit down, and sometimes I just breathe it in and lay out flat. And it is restorative. I just love it. And when I was a kid, I did that a lot. I would run outside barefooted. We'd sleep outside, and none of us sleep outside anymore. All of us wear rubberized soles on our feet. This is his premise. The modern culture has separated itself from Mother Earth. And Mother Earth is here to take care of us. You can just call it Earth, but they use that word in here. And they say it's a rich. This is what's fun too. It's a rich repository for electrons, and we have heard a lot about you need your antioxidants. You need to be eating your vegetables and fruits because you get the Is that right? Am I saying the right thing? Antioxidants?
Yes, you are. Well,
and why do we need them?
Well, let me pause before I answer that.
Okay.
And that kind of leads us into the part in the book where we learn how Clint, the cable TV guy, mm-hmm. meets up with Steve Sinatra, another one of the authors, and he's an integrative cardiologist. And, he says, quote, largely unknown fact, the ground represents the biggest and best natural antioxidant and anti-inflammatory that exists.
Yep.
And he goes on to say, we believe that normal inflammation veers out of control because of a lost contact with the earth. So he meets this integrative cardiologist who is into combining traditional medicine and Eastern medicine, and kind of catches on to this idea and thinks this is an antioxidant, so we can... Go ahead.
Let me interrupt just a minute, because cardiologists do know about electricity, because the electrocardiac cycle, the action potentials and all of that are going. So they are a group of clinicians that might be more likely to talk to this new idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because the electrocardiogram.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So he starts doing some small studies that also show intriguing results. And what he hooks them up to an EKG. Is that right? I should have wrote that down. But he basically, the cardiologist, sees a connection between inflammation and this disconnection from the earth. And if the ground is our source of antioxidants, it can come into our body and act like the antioxidants in that they cling to free radicals. You've heard of free radicals, right? The things from our foods and environment.
Yeah, whenever we have a chemical reaction, we'll get these positive charged ions that come out of that reaction, and they are electron hungry. And they will grab an electron off of anything they can find. And a lot of times they'll take it off of a structural molecule, like the cell membrane or the proteins that are in the interior of the cytoplasm of the cells, and damage them, because once you pull that electron off, it changes the molecular configuration of that molecule. It can kink, or it can do things. So it can be very damaging. And that's why we say, yeah, we need to bind up those free radicals with an electron. And so if we can put something in there that likes to give electrons away, which our antioxidant supplements and food sources will do, that could be helpful. And what these guys are saying is, bring the electrons in through the bottom of your feet up into your tissues, and they'll be there ready for all those free radicals that are going to be produced just for the business of living. So that's why they're saying it's the biggest anti-inflammatory naturally occurring.
Exactly.
And they say your foot is specialized with so many sensory receptors on the bottom of it, and moisture, sweat glands, that you make a really good connection with the earth when you bear it up and put it down there.
That's right. So I'm with you. I think that it's still a preliminary idea in terms of the science behind it. There's small studies, results that are, make me curious, but in order to really be accepted by the scientific community as a legitimate thing, they'll definitely need to do additional and larger studies to prove this electron and anti-inflammatory and antioxidant compound to it. But in the meantime, I think it's awesome to promote going outside. I can't wait now to garden and get my hands in the dirt again and go camping. I will not be rushing out to buy an earthing pad or any of those products.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think there's anything wrong with getting outside and connecting with Earth more, because there's also lots of other benefits to that.
Absolutely. And that's the other thing they didn't control for in any of those studies, were all those other things people were doing. What was their diet? What was their sleep pattern? Were they going outside anyway or not? There were all sorts of things that, if you're going to design that study, would be good. But he went to, I think, the University of California at Irvine, and I think there were some graduate students there that kind of got interested in what he was doing and kind of helped him structure some of these little studies. So I imagine the funding for this will be difficult. I mean, to get the research. Mm-hmm. I don't know. This was written in 2010. This is 2022, 12 years later. It'd be kind of interesting to know if there's something more current on this topic. So I thought, as we go forward with our podcast, if we find something, we'll bring it back to a chit chat.
Yeah, I did a literature search online. I couldn't find much else. Mm-hmm. I did find one small interesting thing. What's his name? I wrote it down. Deepak Chopra.
Oh, I like him.
Yeah, he has the Center for Well-Being.
Yeah, what's he say?
And he led a small study of body workers. Actually, we were just talking about body worker. And it was a 16 body workers self-reported improvement after being grounded. And so that was one of the most recent ones.
What percentage?
No, it's just 16 people.
Oh.
And they self-reported improvement.
Oh, and that's the other thing, the self-reporting on these outcomes, like, I feel better, I got better sleep. In the science world, we're going to want to measure that, and we're going to want to be able to standardize the criteria in some way to evaluate it. So the way they wrote this book, it sounds like it's a panacea for everything. I mean, MS, arrhythmias.
That's kind of how it gets its like pseudoscience name too.
Sciatica, stress relief, varicose veins, bad circulations. And then the women stuff in here. Did you read the Earthing in Women? He says women are more inclined to do this because we just like this kind. We like to come home and kick our shoes off, and men don't. And Tim, I just asked him if he was going to take his shoes off and go outside. He said, no way. So, yeah, I think you might have something that I don't know that we've ever paid attention to. They say that mothers have more of a connection to the earth maybe than men, because we're nurturing and the earth nurtures us. I don't know. But they had five people in the study. So it's like pre-study complaints and after the grounding, and then they asked them these questions, and I thought, well, is this book given to people that they're trying to get to sell their products so that they have something to tell customers about? So I kind of was wondering how they use this book. It's self-published. It didn't go through a publishing house. I'm not going to say that. It's published by a small basic health publication. I don't know who that is. I mean, the publishers, whatever, but should you? I thought this was good. We mentioned lightning and grounding, and one of the questions was if I buy these grounding pads, will I be safe in a thunderstorm? And they said your likelihood of getting hit by lightning is 1 in 600 million thousand or so. It's very low. However, if you live in Florida, there are a whole lot more thunder. That is the lightning capital of the world, evidently. And they said, well, you shouldn't use it during a storm. You should unplug it. So I would caution people there if you buy the equipment. The other thing was if you're on Coumadin, there was a caution there. So there are some medications, because they do say they had a picture of red blood cells, and the guy did it. Dr. Sinatra did this thing with 12 guys in his home in dark field microscopy and showed the blood cells sticking together, and then they earthed for a while, and then lo and behold, the blood cells didn't stick together. And so what they were saying is they loaded electrons on these red blood cells, and then the red blood cells, negative, would repel each other. You can explain it that way, but I don't know if that's what you're really seeing. There could have been something in the fluid on the scope, or it could have been something in that person's breakdown products that influence the plasma. So I thought you got to be kind of careful. And he had those thermographic pictures in here about healing and how the guy fell off the Tour de France bike and bone was sticking out. Not really, but it was a pretty bad gash. And it was healed by the next day. And he ran into a post out in the yard and, sliced his forehead, but he went on back into the clinic and kept working. And the next day it was just a little hairline, but it had been all the way down to the bone, and it was all because of grounding. And, when people start doing that, it's like, maybe you might be right. We don't know.
Right.
We
really can't say for sure.
Right. We don't know. But like I said, I believe this stuff, and I love going barefoot. So I was planning on doing that this morning, and I didn't. But they do tell you asphalt is different than the ground. Asphalt will not work. Concrete, if you can't get to the outside and you have a concrete basement, you can go stretch out on that if you want to. And they do talk about other cultures that do sleep on the ground. And so in the blue zones, I think there were some of those groups that were much more connected to the ground than we are, and much healthier than we are in this country. And we do have rising pathology count. You can go to autism, which they talk about in here, and allergies they talk about in here, cardiovascular disease, cancer. They're all going up in America. So, whatever we can do to make it better, I'm all for it. So I think this is kind of, why not? Why wouldn't you do this?
Go outside barefoot?
Yeah. Why not? What's it going to hurt? It's going to feel good. And you'll get some sunshine, and you might be active, you might move your body, and the lifestyle's going to be good. I did like the quote that they had from Hippocrates in here, because I do believe this. Illnesses do not come upon us out of the blue. They are developed from small daily sins against nature. When enough sins have accumulated, illness will suddenly appear. That's Hippocrates, a long time ago. Smart people back then. We don't know much more than they did, I don't think. However, that's what at 360 Health, we make healthy happen by saying it's what you do every day that's going to influence your life. And so lifestyle changes is what we've been reading about in so many of our books on this podcast. Think about it, folks. What we do daily makes a difference. So go outside, take your shoes off, have some fun.
Absolutely. And at Well Balanced Nutrition, we love nature and the balancing effects that it has on our mood, on our health, and how we can connect with nature through our food and just getting outdoors. So I am Kristen, one of the registered dietitians of Well Balanced Nutrition, where we help you create healthy habits around food. And we invite you to visit us at wellbalancednutrition.com and check us out.
Don't forget to subscribe to the Health Geeks Book Club podcast, no matter what platform you're listening to us on. Hit the alert button, subscribe, review, rate, all the stuff that you can do. And you can also listen to the Health Geeks Book Club podcast on the Less Desirables podcast network, which can be found tldpodnetwork.com. And opinions stated in this podcast are solely those of the contributors and are not necessarily those of our distributors or hosting company. This podcast is copyrighted, and no part can be reproduced without the express written consent of Kristen and Eleanor.